Did you hear that?
And I had to click on it.
Yeah.
It said, got it.
All right. We got it down this time. Great Warren Eckstein, a friend of mine and America's preeminent pet expert. I want to explain to the audience that we sat down to talk, I guess about 6 months ago, right after I started this podcast. And we had a long conversation. It was really a good one. I really enjoyed it. I thought that was over. I was so excited. I'm going to upload this and I'm going to go in and put it together. And I had not recorded it. And so I had to tell Warren, I said, that was just a nice long conversation using your professional knowledge, experience, and time for no reason whatsoever. So I
by the way, that was the best one I ever did too, baby.
Well, I'm not gonna give you any trouble here. It is great to see you again. We've talked many times on the radio, and everybody should know Warren Eckstein by now. He's internationally known pet and animal expert. Been doing a syndicated radio show for 40 years, earning him the title the most trusted pet expert in the U.S. He's done so much TV, you can't possibly have missed him. He's written books. He's a pet trainer and consultant to the stars. And here he is to talk with us about all things related to animals. So it's good to see you again, Warren.
Good to be with you, Dave, as always.
I want to start by just asking you, I think probably a really obvious question, and that is, how did you come to develop a love of animals to the degree that you decided to spend your life with them?
I learned a long, long time ago, Dave, that people disappoint, animals don't. And I learned that early on. You know, I grew up on Long Island, typical Long Island household where behind my parents' house was a little creek, and there was, like rats and possums and all kinds of birds or whatever. And being the first one in the family, the first family to move from the Bronx to Long Island, on weekends, the whole family would come out. I mean, the house was inundated with relatives, cousins I didn't even know. And it was kind of interesting because I needed to get away from them. So the creek was my sanctuary, literally. I would go there and I would have conversations with muskrats and just kind of felt an incredible amount of comfort surrounded by animals, because there's no facade with animals. They don't buy you a drink and call you an SOB when you leave. If they don't like you, you know about it right up front. So that honesty has always encouraged me. And as I got older, I just became closer and closer with the animals. And one of the main reasons is that no one in the family would ever go into my room because they never knew what was in there. Snakes, God knows what Warren has in there now. So I had my own privacy, even as a young kid, Dave.
I'm guessing that at that point too, and you were very young. First of all, did you have pets, actual pets of your own?
Yeah, the first dog we had, believe it or not, when we moved into the house, my father and I went to Macy's and bought a German Shepherd at Macy's.
At Macy's?
Macy's had a pet department many years ago on Long Island. We bought our German Shepherd there, named it Smokey. And this dog and I, we bonded. Remember the show Rin Tin Tin?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was Rusty and Smokey was my Rin Tin Tin. So we'd go out in the backyard and we were politically incorrect, chasing Native Americans all over the place and whatever we were doing. But Smokey was always with me. There was a bond. There was I've never called myself an animal communicator or a psychic, but there was a certain bond there that enabled us to communicate with each other silently. I don't know what it was. I think everyone has it, but I think in most people it's inhibited. And Smokey taught me early on about nurturing and about caring and about understanding that you don't have to be the leader of the pack. You don't have to be dominant. You don't have to be this. You don't have to be that. You can be a friend, a partner, a pet guardian, a parent. You don't have to be the boss all the time. And if you want something that listens all the time, Dave, you better get something with batteries.
What? You're talking about a dog. How old were you at that time?
Oh God, I must have been around 9 or 10 years old.
Okay. Yeah. My first was a collie.
Great dogs.
Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, and this was during the days of Lassie on TV, right? And this collie looked just like Lassie. He was a male. His name was Rusty.
Well, you know, Lassie was a male.
Yes, I did know
Rin
that.
Tin Tin was a female, by the way.
Right. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But we need more dog shows. Now that you're bringing it up, we need a nice heartwarming TV show with dogs in it.
You know, it's interesting. I came across a TV channel on my TV the other day, and they were playing. They were all the TV shows from the 50s and early 60s, and I came across Fury.
Oh, sure.
And the horse, a boy and his horse.
Right.
And even going back to God, the TV shows. Remember Captain Kangaroo?
Absolutely.
Bob Keeshan was a friend of mine. He lived in the next town over from me. And
Really?
I think as a kid watching Captain Kangaroo, it was the Captain and Mr. Green Jeans
Right.
who anthropomorphized and made animals into a dancing bear.
Dancing
made
bear,
animals
bunny rabbit.
People. And I think that was an early on encouragement to me that there's more to animals than there are. So hats off to Captain Kangaroo.
You were talking just a moment ago about your bonding with Smokey, and that's one thing that I can never get over, and that is the bond between an animal and me. In particular, we have two dogs. They're both rescues. We've had them for years now. They're both Yorkies, Yorkshire Terriers, and one of them, and it's funny. It's like the dogs pick the people. One of them is my wife's dog. Her name is Cricket. She loves me too, but she wants mama. And the other one is absolutely my dog. She follows me around every day, all day long. I'm absolutely sure she's sitting right outside the door now, being nice and quiet.
Well, you know, Yorkies are just big dogs dressed in little dog suits.
Yeah, they seem to think
Terriers,
so.
they're terriers, Stratford Terriers. Come on.
Yeah. But the comfort and the love that is just effusive from dogs. And I've never seen one that didn't have that didn't, be wanting to give you everything and ask nothing in return. And I just can't, I try to understand. I mean, you can get that from pretty much any pet, but what is it about dogs, you think, that has this psychological connection?
Well, dogs were really socialized early on, so they've been part of us for years. And it's interesting too, though, because a lot of people would say that they agree with you, but for those people that have never been owned by a cat, they don't understand the concept of how well cats can bond with their guardians as well. I've had as many as 26, 27 feral cats at one time. And obviously, as you say, everyone is different. But I got to tell you, if you spend the same amount of time bonding with your cat as you do with the dog, you'll get the same relationship. The problem is a lot of people say, well, it's a cat. Cats do what they want to do, so I'll just let it be. But if you socialize and you improve your cat's self-esteem, and I mean that seriously, and build up their self-image, cats are just as bonded with the people they live with as dogs are. They may show it in different ways. They may need some more time on their own. They may be a little bit more independent. But the bottom line is I have seen cats working with kids with Down syndrome and autism and adults with schizophrenia. And the relationship, the way the cats bonded with them, really no different than the way dogs do. But as I said, a lot of people just have this misconception about cats. And as I said earlier, for the most part, they've never had the opportunity to have one in the house with them.
Yeah, we have a cat too, and you're absolutely right. The difference between the cat, she will come up and sit next to me for a while, let me pet her, purr. She loves to take naps. In fact, that's the only time that she and the dogs really get along. It's because they will all come down and lay down on the bed with me and take naps, holding into their own area.
I often joke, Dave, that the difference is when you call your dog, he comes right away. When you call your cat, it's kind of like they take a message, get back to you a little bit later.
I do an impersonation of a cat. If I was able to do that on camera, I'd do it for you. But basically, I go to the back door, and act like you'll say meow and look up. It's like, are you going to open it? What am I waiting for here for? So you open the door and stand back, and the cat very slowly creeps forward, looks out the door, looks both directions, steps back and goes, yeah, and goes back in the house.
It's warmer in the house. You can actually watch them. If people would take the time with their dog or their cat, they can actually watch their thinking process. You know, should I eat the food he put down, or if I don't eat it, will he add something to it? You can watch their thinking process. If you spend enough time, listen, I don't have a pair of jeans that don't have holes in the knees. I believe that spending time on their level, number one, establishes that incredible relationship. But number two, it gives me the opportunity to watch them as part of them, rather than watch them as the 6 foot tall human, you know?
Exactly. You know, that occurred to me when my son, who is now, wow, my little guy, he's 45, and but when he was very small, and I realized, and I would watch him interact with other adults, and he was very hesitant and very nervous about it at times, and I would say, well, sure, this other person is huge. And then I came to realize it's the same thing of the dog. It's like, what if I took my small son, who was, you know, barely 2 years old, and somebody comes in with a dog whose head is above his? I don't think I want to go to a dog that stands 8 feet tall either. And the animals are kind of the same way. I lost my train of thought.
I often say, David, getting to your point, that very often, exactly what you said. I tell people, one of the reasons I tell people on the air that you should spend more time on the floor with your pets is the concept of exactly living in a world where everyone around you is 18 feet tall. You'd have to hump their leg or jump on them just to get their visualization. So yeah, it's to some people it sounds eccentric, and heaven forbid I should ever be called eccentric, but I think it's really important to understand that when you live with a different species, it's important to give and take. It's like a marriage. It's give and take, you know, sometimes their way, sometimes your way, and you kind of meet in the middle. I'm a firm believer, you know, I train dogs for the military, the police department, in every continent in the world, except for the North Pole. I'll get there someday. And the bottom line is, training is important. Training a dog gives you the opportunity to communicate with the dog in a positive way. Very often I've walked into homes, and when you say no, the dog comes thinking that's his name, because that's all he hears. No, 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 don't do this, don't do that. So it's important.
Same with kids.
Exactly right. So it's important from a community point of view to communicate what you expect. And that's where basic training comes into play. However, again, it has to be positive. Forget this stuff you see on TV with throw the dog on his back and you got to, you know, people misinterpret that term alpha, and they think that means that you got to be the toughest, the most dominant. You know, when I was in Europe, I was working and studying some wolf packs, and the bottom line is the most dominant, or the alpha wolf, the alpha male and the alpha female, is not the most aggressive. It's the one that breed the best to keep the pack going. Those are the alphas. You know, the little ones, the younger ones will challenge once in a while, but you don't have to be the boss to have a good relationship in a marriage or with your pet.
I got a question for you that maybe doesn't come up too often. Of course, you've answered millions of questions, so maybe you have, but my wife just had her 65th birthday, and she's she's very proud, but also a little bit nervous. You know, oh, I'm elderly now. You know, it's like I've got my Social Security card, but I'm a few years older, and we start to think about what happens to us in the future. And I think this is something that everybody can relate to, even if you're not in your 60s or 70s as we are. You have parents, or you have grandparents who are at that age, and they may be in a situation where they're alone now. You know, my wife and I talk about, well, you know, one of us is going to go sooner or later. What are you going to do? How are you going to live? Maybe you should think about these things. And certainly we both come to the conclusion is, oh yes, I would have to have a pet. I would have to have one of our girls now, or whoever. First of all, is it a good idea for an elderly person, especially an elderly shut-in, to have a pet? And secondly, at what point do you buy a person a pet, knowing that the pet may very well outlive the person?
You know, I've worked a little bit with Meals on Wheels for the elderly.
Yeah.
And part of what they do is not only deliver food for them, but they'll bring food for the pet or whatever. And I could not visualize or imagine these seniors living without their pet.
Right.
However, there are options. For example, if a senior citizen wants a pet, don't go out and get him a puppy. Go out and let him adopt and work with him for an 8-year-old dog or a 10-year-old cat or
Right.
whatever, an older age. I personally have a living trust for my pets, and I wish everyone would set that up. I'll tell you a story that just happened not that long ago. I was doing a remote broadcast from a shelter right here in Southern California. And as I'm doing the broadcast, a younger couple, when I say younger in their 40s, but I never could say that before, but a younger couple kind of walked into the shelter with a basset hound that was like 14, 15 years old. That's my dogs barking in the background. And what happened is that their parent had died and they didn't want the dog. So they're taking this 14 or 15-year-old basset hound to the shelter. What do you think is going to happen to that dog?
Oh.
No one's going to adopt that dog. So what we did find a home for it. So the bottom line is having a living trust is important, so that if when you cross over yourself, that you know your pets are taken care of. And don't just say, well, you know, my kids will take care of it or my best friend will take care of it. You need to get it in writing, and you need to have it done by either an attorney or notarized, what the specific things are, who's going to be feeding, what are the financial arrangements. That's all very important. And if you're like me or like you, where your pets are not just family pet, but part of the family, then you need to have that trust set up. And I'm a firm believer in that. And you can't always accept the word from people. You can accept the word from your dog or cat, but people lie. And sometimes, well, I'll take care of your dog if something were to happen to you. And that's exactly how I saw this basset hound walk into the shelter.
Good answers. I suspect you spend the huge majority of your time talking about dogs and cats. What about other animals? I know you've dealt with other animals and you've helped people with their birds and their fish and everything else. What are the stranger animal relationships that you've been involved with?
I'll talk about an interesting one that came out of Dallas, as a matter of fact. It was an interesting call. A man had a large boa constrictor and he kept it in a tank.
Yeah.
And the boa constrictor stopped eating and wasn't behaving the way a normal boa constrictor was. So he called me up and I'm explaining to him, this snake, other than the times you handle him, has been living in the same environment, the same tank for how many years?
Right.
Dude, you're boring your snake. So what I advised him to do was get a larger area and change the environment. You know, snakes don't live in one specific area, they move around. So if you have that type of reptile, change the environment a little bit. And sure enough, he did it, and the snake started eating and it came out of it. And he was absolutely fine. But it's the same type of advice for people that have fish. You know, fish are the most abused animal in America. So if you have fish, understand that if you have a tank, it's nice, but make some changes once in a while. Don't bore your fish. I know that sounds crazy to some people, but put something new in there or change something around a little bit. Even cats, for that matter, Dave. One of the biggest problems I get with cats is they're scratching up the house. They're doing this. You know, you don't have to go out and buy an expensive scratching post. You go to the supermarket, you get a free cardboard box that smells like fish. It's like kitty nirvana. And they're free. You can change them every day. I tell people, be creative, put one on top of the other, make a duplex, cut a hole in it, throw them out the next day. Every box smells different. One smells like fish, one smells like tomatoes. So that mental stimulation for all living things, including ourselves, but for animals as well, is so critical. And a good part of what I do, a lot of the answers that I give on the show, a lot of the resolutions have to do with lack of stimulation, lack of not physical, but I walk my dog 5 times a day, great, but lack of mental stimulation. I think that's really important. And another quick call from Dallas, Texas. A man calls me up, and in fact, he actually flew me down to Dallas. This is many years ago when people had money. And he said to me, I have this great dog, Warren, but for some reason, it's not behaving properly. So I said, how much exercise is the dog getting? He said, well, I have 5 acres in Dallas, 5 acres property, and the dog has all this area to run. I said, let's look out your window right now. We did. And where do you think the dog was? He was lying under a tree, getting no more exercise than a dog living in a studio apartment in Midtown Manhattan.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that I had him had a tetherball in the backyard. I had him build little jumps for the dog. I had him actually take a child's swimming pool, fill it with sand, and put the dog's toys in it. So his dog now had his own little sandbox in the backyard. All of these things made a difference. So any behavioral issues can change with a little good thinking on the guardian's part.
You can see that with some of the enclosures that are being created now in zoos. And I will tell you, and my wife knows this, she loves to go to the zoo. We have great zoos here. The Dallas Zoo and the Fort Worth Zoo are both really spectacular. But I hate to go to zoos because I just can't bear to see animals that are restricted in terms of the areas that they have in which to live. And I understand some of the arguments that I've heard about, well, you know, a lot of these are animals that have been rescued from bad situations. They wouldn't be alive otherwise. They've been injured or what have you, and all that. So, but you see that kind of stimulation that's given, especially to the primates, right? To the gorillas and other monkeys and such. What are your thoughts about zoos? I'm interested.
You know, at one time in my life, I served as a peace officer for the state of New York, investigating animal abuse. And back then, a lot of the zoos were absolutely atrocious.
Yeah.
Especially when you head, sometimes if you're heading down south towards Florida, Louisiana, they have these roadside zoos and they have a tiger or a bear in the back, and absolutely crazy. So when I was younger, I was really anti-zoo. As I've gotten older and I realized that what's going on in Africa and South America and other parts of the world with the people expanding different things that they're doing, these animal species are being decimated. So there are certain zoos, like, I don't know much about the Dallas, but San Diego Zoo, for example, yeah, where they do an incredible amount of positive breeding to keep the animals alive. The other thing is that going to a zoo should be a time for education. And I think if people were more educated about what's happening in the environment where these animals are living, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not a greenie from Southern California, I'm the opposite from Long Island. But the bottom line is that people realize that it's not only the animals, what's taking place to cause this problem. And so many species are being ruined. So if it's a good, reliable zoo that tries to emulate exactly what they would live with in the wild, and you're right, a lot of these zoos do take in a lot of animals that were abused, but for the most part, those animals more or less go to sanctuaries rather than zoos.
Oh, really?
So I'm not a big fan. I don't go to zoos myself, but I do understand there's a positive aspect of them.
You have notably worked with some very famous people. We've talked a little bit about it in the past. Do you have any anecdotes you care to share about some of the people that you've worked with and some of the animals that they've had that you've helped?
Yeah, when David Letterman was first starting out, he actually had a morning show called The David Letterman Show before Late Night with David Letterman. And I was training his dogs, Bob and Stan, at the time. So I was on his show, that show, and then I went to late night TV with him. But I was at one point, I said to Dave, after working with his dogs, Bob and Stan, I said, Dave, you're lucky your dog, Bob, doesn't have a space between his teeth. Otherwise, he'd be hosting the show talking about you. The dogs were funny. The dogs were funny. A lot of comedians have a more of a laid back attitude off when they're not on. But his two dogs were funny. I mean, I think he really practiced the jokes, but incredible guy, really loved animals. But I've done some things on his show. We had him dressed in a suit of suet. We put him in a cage just covered with a suit of suet, which we kept at the NBC where they keep their food. That could have been the problem. And I brought a deer on with me, a rescue deer, and a skunk and some squirrels. And we put him in there with Dave. They wouldn't go near him. Not one of them would eat anything on him. It was like and then the other thing we did is we had a sled dog race up and down the hallways of NBC. So Dave was an interesting guy to work with. On the other hand, I got to tell you that Rodney Dangerfield, the funniest man I ever met.
Yeah.
First of all, when I trained his dog, we became friendly. His dog was peeing all over the floor, which I found no respect. It was perfect. He's an interesting guy because he would invite me and my wife, who's no longer with us, she passed away, to his shows, and we'd go backstage. And I got to tell you, whatever your thoughts on cannabis is, you can go backstage at a Dangerfield concert, not be high by the time you left. The smoke was all over. but he loved his dogs. And I think the funniest line I ever heard when animals is when he said to me, you know, Warren, talk about no respect. My dog closes his eyes before he humps my leg. I had to be the greatest one-liner I ever. Lily Tomlin, another client of mine, working with her dog Tess, which was a Norwich Terrier, was kind of like working with Sybil. The dog had multiple personalities, but after spending time with Lily, I realized that she practices different personalities every day, or at least at that time. So the dog was kind of confused. And
because that's what she did. That's what she does.
Exactly. And then I also trained a goat named Bucky and I trained all the dogs. If you remember back when the Islanders were winning every hockey game in America, I trained all their dogs, the Jets, the Mets. So a lot of my celebrities were, you know, Cheryl Tiegs. I remember going to Gregory Peck's house. She was dating his son at the time. And Gregory Peck had a golden retriever in Bel Air. So I drive through the gates to Bel Air. Anyone knows Bel Air is like this big place. And I pull into Gregory Peck's driveway. His three-legged dog greets me. So I'm going into the back now to work with Cheryl's Fox Terrier. She had two of them, Martini and Olive. And on the balcony is Gregory Peck saying, "Hey, Warren." And it's like God talking to me. This is like God, you know. So I've had a lot of, you know, I've worked with, I don't want to mention all the names, but I've worked with kings, presidents. I helped President Ford out, sultans, princesses.
Anybody of that stature who you feel should not have been a pet owner? You don't have to name names, of course.
No, but yeah, there are the people that have the pet as kind of a fashion accessory.
Yes.
And that bugs the heck out of me. If you have a pet, it's your pet. It's not your caretaker's pet.
Right.
It's not your butler's pet. So that used to really kind of piss me off a little bit when I saw that happening. But I got to be honest with you. Most of the times, the affluent actresses, actors, politicians. I'm looking at pictures on my wall of Tom Brokaw, my good friend Tony Dow, who just died recently.
Right. Yeah.
And Liberace's hanging on my wall. I helped Liberace out with his dog. He had a doghouse shaped like a piano. So yeah, for the most part, I think people in that status where they have to be on whenever they're out in public, whether it be a politician or an entertainer. I think for the most of them that I've worked with, the solace they had was with their dog or their cat, or whatever pet they had at home, because, you know, then they could be themselves.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. Listen, I was looking at your website, thepetshow.com, right?
Yeah.
And I saw that I was looking at some of the subjects that you've addressed, and they're really, really good. Could we address a couple of those here?
Sure.
One that caught my attention. Oh, wait a minute. I almost forgot something you were talking about when you were talking about the snake and giving pets, you know, more interesting surroundings and so forth to keep them from getting bored. Before I forget it, I want to go back to that for just a moment. And that is, we're heading into winter. As you and I are discussing, it's the last day of November in 2022. So we're heading into winter. You're in Los Angeles, not that big a problem. Here I am in Texas, where we have all kinds of winter weather problems. And of course, everybody far north of here, you know, everybody is a shut-in, including their pets. How do you keep the pets engaged? How do you keep them physically active and mentally alert when you're shut in for weather problems, like weather, you know, long periods of time?
I was going to reach it right here, but one of the first books I wrote was a book called Pet Aerobics. It was an exercise book for dogs or cats. They did a big piece in People magazine. They called, I wasn't thrilled with this as a veteran, but they called me the Jane Fonda of the pet world. There are many things you can do. For example, staircase sprints up and down the staircase, monkey in the middle. You can create all kinds of indoor games as well. And that's important to keep them mentally stimulated. You know, in the colder weather, And a lot of dogs really enjoy the colder weather. You know, you can take them outside and you can play with them. I literally had clients on the Northeast that would shovel their backyard paths in their backyard so their dogs can go around and play in the path. So
That's
you have
great.
to be creative, you know, and if they have a staircase, that's fine, and create new things, or maybe if your dog has a best friend, invite them over, let them play in the house. And for cats, the most important thing is, I believe that cats should be kept inside anyway. You know, it's way too dangerous for cats nowadays. It's just dangerous between coyotes and other things out there. But for cats, as I go back to, you know, cats are nomadic by nature. They love changing their environment. Change your environment, you know, grow some organic catnip and other great plants for them. The cardboard boxes, paper bags, all of those things can make a difference. But if you compensate inside with as much exercise as you can give, that's fine. Other than that, you know, if the streets are clear and it's a little cold outside, put a jacket on your best friend and go for a jog.
Okay, that's good. All right,
Don't let them eat too much. That's another thing. If they're not getting enough exercise, don't let them put on those extra pounds. And people don't realize that the average cat weighs 10 pounds. So if you put on 2 pounds to that cat, it's 25% to 20% of his body weight. So keep them in good shape and just make sure you feed them right. And one last tip I want to give to all the people also is, if you have a dog or a cat, they can get all the nutrition in one feeding a day. But that causes a lot of behavior issues, because when you have an empty belly, you get into mischief.
Yes.
So my recommendation is, if you have pets and you can, feed them smaller amounts more frequently throughout the day. I think they'll be a lot more comfortable and ultimately a lot healthier. All the cat veterinarians I deal with say that's the best way to feed cats.
It makes all the sense in the world. I remember when my father was still alive and he had a dog that he absolutely adored. I was with him for a couple of days and I said, I see you only feed the dog once a day. He said, that's just a dog. She's all right. She's happy. I said, well, you think she's happy, but how happy would you be if you only ate once a day?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, it makes sense. I have another question, and this is kind of related to my relationship with one of our Yorkies, Amelia. And that is separation anxiety. And I saw this in one of the topics that you've discussed on your show. How do you raise a dog to not have separation anxiety? And perhaps more difficult question is such as my situation is, this girl does get separation anxiety, and she's a rescue, and we don't even know anything about her past.
Well, you know, one of the things with rescue dogs, a lot of people call it separation anxiety. In some cases, it's really abandonment issues. And I'll go into a little bit of both of that. The best thing for separation anxiety is to, when you first bring a pet into the household, is to, and you want to be on top of the puppy or kitten 24, I know you do, but just go into another room and close the door. 5 minutes at a time, 3 minutes at a time, come back out. The other thing is, when you leave, most people, the second biggest lie in the world besides the check is in the mail is telling your dog you'll be right back. You know you're not coming right back. So what I recommend is, when you leave the house, don't make it a big deal. In other words, dogs are really perceptive. They know if you pick up a purse, or you put on your jacket, put your hat on, grab an umbrella, you're going out. So I say, practice going in and out. Walk out of the house without your purse. No long goodbyes when you leave. You know, say, I'll see you later, and then just leave. If you practice that and the dog starts realizing when you leave, you're going to be coming back all the time, that's the way to deal with separation anxiety. However, abandonment issues, remember, so many dogs that I work with and my listeners call with have been abandoned once or maybe twice, or taken to a shelter. So their association with you leaving is, and dogs learn through the associative memory, their association with you leaving is that maybe Dave's not coming back. Maybe he's not going to come back, and we're going to be, and this can go on for years and years, no matter how long you had the dog. So the best way to deal with separation anxiety is to let the dog realize that when you leave, it's not always for long periods of time. Leave his best stuff around, leave a radio on for him, of course, but don't make a big, and when you come back, don't make, I know you want to hug him and kiss him, and I do too, but don't make a big deal of it. Hey, how you doing? We did okay. And give him a few minutes to calm down, then give him all that attention.
Oh,
that excited.
My wife will love you for saying that, because I'm the one that comes through the door, goes, hi girls, we're home. Hey. And they get all excited and they start barking. And she says, stop that. Just wait until they calm down a little bit.
And separation anxiety is one of the most common things I deal with. And a lot of it has to do, you know, when you're dealing with so many of my listeners have rescue dogs. And
Yeah.
my own two rescues, Molly and Willie, to boot. So so many of my listeners have rescues dogs. And, first of all, they expect to bring the dog home and all of a sudden the dog's gonna be rin tin tin or lassie. It takes them time to decompress.
Sure.
And they were just coming from, maybe they went from a situation where on the streets or in a home to a shelter where there's barking and craziness and hoses going and coming in and out and all the. So you got to give them some time to just decompress a little bit. Then that socialization process. People say, what's the most important thing you can do with a pet? Training is important, but more important than that is socialization. The more time you socialize the dog, the more time you spend letting him know that things around him are okay, whether it be other dogs, people, kids, whatever. I have no children. When I leave the house, my TV is on Nickelodeon. Why? Because I want my kids to feel comfortable hearing the sounds of kids in a non-threatening way. And now my dogs love kids. So it's little things like that that make all the difference in the world. The problem is that most people in my profession, whether we trainers or behavior, they focus on heel, sit, stay down, and come.
Yeah.
Rather than focus.
Yeah.
And I've yet to see a dog wind up at a shelter because he doesn't sit. It's usually they're jumping, they're humping, they're digging, they're scratching, they're barking, whatever problems they have. And that's what I try to resolve. And I usually try to do it from the pet's point of view.
I want to ask you one question that's a serious issue. And this is, I think, something that we all kind of try to not think about. At some point, the animals don't live as long as we do. And at some point, they start to have all kinds of problems, and you end up taking them to the vet more and more often. The vet bills get steep. The dog or cat is getting really sick and seems to be lethargic and so forth. At what point do you make the decision and become okay with the idea of euthanization?
You're gonna make me cry now, Dave. Really, every time I talk about this, here's a couple of things. First of all, no one can tell you when it's time to say goodbye except you. So whenever I have to say goodbye, and I've said goodbye to hundreds or whatever, I look in their eyes, and I honestly believe this from my soul. I look in their eyes, and somehow they know.
Yeah.
But the other thing I do, which is maybe I can because I'm a little lucky, is my dogs are never put to sleep on a steel table at a veterinarian's office. When it's time for my dogs to cross that rainbow bridge, I have a vet come to my home. Again, it may sound crazy to people. Maybe I'll put the dog's favorite music on the radio, maybe even light a candle, say a couple of prayers, maybe even have some of its very close friends over at the same time, human friends. And this way, the dog is on my lap. The dog is on my lap as he crosses that bridge. And it's not on a cold table with people he doesn't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. My nephew had to say goodbye to one of his rescues not too long ago. And he didn't know what to do. And his friends were saying, well, you got to go to the vet and the vet will euthanize him. I said, no, here's what you need to do, Michael. And he had a vet. I recommended a vet, and the vet came to his home. And even though he said goodbye, and even though with tears in his eyes, he felt so comfortable doing it that way. So I'm a big advocate, and more veterinarians are doing that. And the problem now is there's such a shortage of veterinarians and vet techs across America. It's a major problem. But that's what I would recommend, if possible, the best way.
That is what happened with our the first Yorkie we had. We've had 4 now. We just love the breed. The first one was a little baby that we got from a breeder. She was a championship line. We didn't, know what we were doing. And so we raised her from a pup, and the time she was 6 weeks old, and all the way through her life. And then she finally got to a point where she just wasn't going to be able to continue. We took her to the doctor. The doctor says, there's nothing I can do for her. So we held her. And I did exactly what you said. I looked into her eyes. And yes, Warren, I know she knew. And we were saying goodbye. And it broke my heart, but I felt that the dog was comforted by that closeness there. And they gave her the the IV drip, and she just faded away.
I think animals are more accepting of the final days, the final goodbye, than people often are.
Yeah.
I think they know. I think they know. There's an old saying when I was studying in Europe and I was working a little bit at the University of Frankfurt. I remember talking to an old timer, and he was saying that we believe, meaning his group, we believe that before a dog passes on, if they're by themselves, they'll do the death howl. A special howl. And I've seen that actually happen with dogs. And maybe that's more of years ago, but it's kind of like a howl. And I like to believe it's them saying hello as they're crossing over to the friends on the other side. But it's also interesting how many people have told me that when they've had to say goodbye to a pet that was very close to them, that pet will appear to them in a dream or I buy that because I've had dreams about so many of the animals I've had in the past, including my pet pig who's behind me.
Did you say a pet pig?
I had two of them. This is Corky. And I had another one named Spotty. They were both to be slaughtered, and they were both little when I got them. God knows they weighed to 1,200 pounds. Actually, Spotty actually it's an interesting story. I was doing David Letterman's show, and Dave said, "Warren, I love pigs. Can you bring a pig on the air?" Dave, I'm in New York City. You want me to do this Thursday night? It's Tuesday. Where am I going to find a pig in New York City? So what I did is I found a place in upstate New York, a farm, and the deal was we gave them so much money that would give me the pig, and I would bring the pig back the next day, and they'd be able to keep the money. It was a great deal for them.
Yeah.
However, I took the pig home on a Tuesday night, and I spent the night with the pig Tuesday and all day Wednesday. This pig wasn't going anywhere. He was now mine. So now the pig is very small, and I taught him to walk. I taught him to skateboard. That was the whole thing we did on the Letterman show. But I taught him to walk on a leash and harness, and I'm walking around Long Island, and with this little pig on a leash and harness, and people are going, "What's that?" And I said, "Some rad dog from Greece." But then as he started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, I had no option. So that's when I bought my sanctuary. It was I paid $29,000 for 5 acres. That ought to tell you something. Way upstate New York in a town called Cobleskill. And I wound up with the 2 pigs, 12 chickens, 27 rabbits, 38 rescue dogs. So I kept rescuing, and I kept the place till they all crossed the bridge, and then I finally sold it. But
we had a pig. And during when it was a fad to get Vietnamese potbellies. Yeah, we got one because my wife always loved pigs. Her mother passed away. I got her the baby pig as to comfort her. And she actually named the pig after her mother, Violet. And it was an honor. It was not, it wasn't a joke. And I've been telling people ever since then that pigs are misunderstood. Pigs are widely regarded as disgusting and dirty and sloppy. And I say, you know what? The only reason that pigs, tell me if I'm wrong here, Warren, the only reason that pigs wallow around in mud is because they don't have any other source of cool water to cool down their bodies, right? They prefer fresh water. And there's a lot you can learn from a pig about pigs. And one thing that I learned is that people said, well, these pigs are very smart. Well, yes, they are. We taught Violet tricks, and she was just delightful. And she would always, delight everybody who came to see her. She would lay down with me and take naps and snuggle right up with me like a cat would. But the thing about teaching a pig to do something you want it to do is the pig is very quick to learn, and that includes housebreaking. The pig will go outside, but the pig is different than a dog in one respect. The pig will only do it if the pig wants to do it. The pig,
that's what makes them so close to human beings. Yeah,
right.
That's exactly right. Smarter than most animals I've worked with. But the interesting thing about pigs is, number one, you're absolutely right. They're clean. If they had a choice between slop and apple pie, they're going for the apple pie.
Right.
They just don't have a choice. They got to eat the slop. Is the emotional aspect of it. Talk about separation anxiety. When I had Spotty and Corky in upstate, and I was doing a lot of traveling then, I've written a couple of books and I was all over the place. If I came back to the sanctuary and I didn't have a gift for them, Nothing. They would have nothing to do with me. I brought them XXX t-shirts from Rochester, New York, Evansville, Indiana. And it was just the concept of me giving it to them. I had to give them something. So pigs and their memories are incredible as well. Very, very smart, very, very clean. That's, and again, they're very close makeup wise to human beings.
Yeah, well, they are biologically, right?
Exactly.
Use pig valves for people.
Even their skin for burns and their skin for burn victims.
Yeah,
I'm not thrilled about, but because now they have artificial stuff, knock on wood. But I think the bottom line is pigs are definitely, there was an old saying about farmers that the only part of the pig that's not edible is the squeal. And I think that's why they didn't survive so much. But listen, I absolutely adore pigs. I think they're incredible animals, but all animals are incredible. I just had my personal experiences with Spotty and Corky.
All right, Warren, we've been going for over half an hour. I'd like to try to start to wrap this up. But first of all, I want to, because I looked at your webpage, as I always do before I talk to you, and I go, man, there's like 2 pages of all the things that Warren has done and the people that he's known and the things and the animals that he's dealt with, the TV shows you've done, the books you've written. You've got your hugs and kisses 4-in-1 allergen-free formulas and so forth. You're still doing your syndicated radio show. I don't know where you find time to do all of this, but what would you like to mention about all of these things that you do that I can help pass the word a little?
Well, a couple of different things. Number one is not too long ago, I started focusing on my YouTube channel. It's easy to ask questions, but I have this YouTube channel now where literally you can see videos of me doing, this is going to get aged. People remember the Mickey Mouse Club, not the old Mickey Mouse Club, but the new Mickey Mouse Club. Yeah. With Britney Spears. I was the creature keeper on that show. So you can see videos there's a video on there with me, Merv Griffin, and I'm trying to think, Marriott Hartley, and I brought 12 of the largest dogs on stage at the same time, and it was just fun stuff. But in terms of information, they can listen to my radio shows, the cast them, but they can also, I do a couple of different ways. My videos on my YouTube channel, some are long, and we do these things called shorts, where they're just like a minute or so. I'm just boom, 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 every day giving new tips. So people should go to YouTube channel. It's free. Subscribe. It doesn't cost you a penny. And it's simply youtube.com/my name, Warren Eckstein. So that's important to me, that YouTube channel. I'm doing a lot of work there. But the most important thing to me is, I was married for 19 years. My wife was from Australia. When she passed away in 1990 at 36 years old from melanoma, very rapidly, 6 months from diagnosis to the funeral. Faye had worked alongside of me, saving thousands and thousands of animals the whole time we were together. So when she died, I said, what way could I honor her? And so I started the Hugs and Kisses Animal Fund, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And what we do is so different. I'll give you a prime example. I got it right here. I just donated money to the women's prison in Lockhart, Texas.
Oh. People
wouldn't even heard of this place. But this is one of these. So and we also donated to Native American reservations in Montana. What it is there are so many mom and pop groups out there that have no support. They don't have the big organizations with the marketing and the public relations. Those groups do a lot of work, but let me tell you, the most important work for saving animals is done by the people that raise $50 for a garage sale to spay a dog. And so what I decided to do is I have the ability to raise some funds. So by that, what I do is we grant to only small mom and pop organizations. No one could be paid. No one gets salaried on their organizations. And we donate to the small mom and pops. And in terms of the organization itself, the Hugs and Kisses Animal Fund, Dave, every penny goes directly to the animals. All expenses are covered by me. All the costs are covered by me personally. So every penny that people donate goes directly out to the animals and to the small mom and pop, like this group, the Lockhart Women's Prison in Lockhart, Texas, where the inmates train dogs in obedience so that they're eligible for adoption to the public. So that's important. So if people want to find out more about that, obviously it's on my website, thepetshow.com, but they can also just go to the Hugs and Kisses Animalfund.org. And I'm really proud about that because we're kind of like, in a small way, kind of like the United Way for pets, Yeah.
Warren, thank you. Thank you very much.
Dave, always my pleasure.